Welcome back to the road to City Hall. Anthony Weiner has published his 64 keys to the city, and some of the other candidates have also offered ideas on several key issues in the race for mayor, but they are not alone. My next guests have put together their own report about 15 policies that they say the next mayor of New York City can implement. The report is titled Innovation in the City, and it spotlights initiatives that they think should be considered by the next mayor. Joining me to talk about some of these recommendations are Cathie, who is the former head of the city's Office of Financial Empowerment. She's currently the CEO of my old outfit, the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions. Two of the authors of the report are also here. Kleiman is the director of the Wagner Innovation Labs at New York University, and Jonathan Bowles is the executive director of the Center for an Urban Future. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming in. And Jonathan, what made you decide to have the center jump into this big citywide debate going on?
Well, you know, look, New York is facing some real big challenges, and these days, cities across the country and around the world have been really the drivers of innovation. From Seattle to Chicago, they've been developing innovative policies, and we think that the next mayor is going to really have to look to these cities because New York is going to have to innovate. It is going to have to experiment. We're seeing declining amounts of federal funding, but the problems aren't getting any easier. But to innovate, we should really look to see what else is going on. And there's some great innovations around the country, and we think that it's pretty easy for the city to take a look at some of these policies that we have profiled in this report and could easily run with them.
And this is open source, right? I mean, you don't particularly care which candidate picks them up as far as you're concerned. You're hoping all 10 will...
It's for anyone to look at these ideas, and even some other cities have already called us up and said, we're really interested in this. And what inspired us was the thing about Mike Bloomberg is that he tried things, he experimented, he was willing to fail. And there's a fear that the next mayor might not have that luxury to go out there and try different things and see what we can do in the city. So in a sense, we tried to do some innovation homework for the next candidates by fielding hundreds of ideas really that we found around the world and then retrofit them. We winnow them down to 15 that make sense here in New York City.
Okay, 'tis the season. Let's talk about some of them. I want to start with you, Cathie. Actually, there's a proposal for kind of a savings account that would be partly publicly supported, that would follow a child from kindergarten all the way through college. What's that about?
That's right. That's called the Kindergarten to College Savings Account. And it's basically modeled on something that the UK implemented several years back, which was like a universal child savings account. At a city level, it's really hard, and those accounts were set up at birth in the UK. At the city level, it's really hard to think about opening accounts for every child born in the city of New York. But the idea that San Francisco did in taking a look at what the UK program was, is they thought about where is a touch point that the city in particular is engaging with families with children. And of course, entering the school system is one of them, and entering into the public school system. So what they did is they set up a system where they would open up a savings account for every kindergartner entering into a public school in San Francisco. And they would seed it with a $50 deposit. And then there's a lot of opportunities along the way to incentivize parents to continue to save and to add a little bit more along the way. But there's really some great research that shows that just by mere virtue of a child having an account for college, that child is 7 times more likely to go on to college than those who do not. And so...
Is the idea that contributions from the parents would also be tax advantaged, or is this the key innovation here that the account is opened and the default mode would be to try and close the account, that every kid gets one along with their, their polio shot?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like the behavioral economics of let's get everybody just into the account. So as you register for school, as you fill out those forms that when you're registering your child for school, you immediately can get that child enrolled in one of those savings accounts. And then there's opportunities later on to try to incentivize. The tax structure is a little bit more complicated because, that would involve sort of engaging state and federal players, but it's certainly, the account itself is sort of the vehicle by which families can continue to save. And they are doing they're raising additional funds, both private philanthropy, corporate sponsors, and others to kind of continue to incentivize. And it helps them to incorporate that financial education into the classroom experiences along the way, with real life experiences that the child knows they have an account in their name already.
Sure, you're going to teach them about banks and accounts and money anyhow.
Yeah.
Neil, tell us about this idea of sort of crowdsourcing or open sourcing capital projects. We spend billions and billions of dollars on where to do bridges and parks and pedestrian plazas, and you're suggesting the innovation here is that everybody can weigh in on it.
That's exactly right. This is one of the wildest ideas we came up with, also from the United Kingdom. It's crowdsourcing for capital projects, what we build. And it's modeled after this famous website, Kickstarter, in which you put a business plan up on a website, and then others out there, whoever they are, other businesses, corporations, but really community folks will look at it and say, I want to support that business and make it happen. So this takes the capital project process and turns it on its head. So rather than planning departments deciding what gets built, communities will recommend, this is the community garden we want to see, this is the bridge that we think should be repaired in this way.
No, I totally get that, because it reminds me of the participatory budgeting that some of the city council members
exactly
have
right.
done. But there's an element of people putting up their own money, which I found amazing in a city where, you know, look, they've taxed us enough, they've got billions to spend, they're going to bond out and borrow billions of dollars. Why should we have to put a penny into any of this? Well,
what's been happening in the United Kingdom is they're thinking of taking capital projects that we already have money allocated for, taking a percentage of it, a small percentage, 3-5%, and say, look, we're going to spend these dollars on rehabbing the schools, community gardens, bridges, what have you. Let's open up some of that to see what communities want to do, what creative ideas grow. And then in many instances, it won't be other community members opening up their wallets, but other businesses or corporations that see that as something they might want branding on and would support as well.
But why shouldn't someone in the neighborhood say that, you know, I want to support a new swimming pool in the Bronx? Why shouldn't I support a new community garden? We're seeing people on Kickstarter fund things like small businesses, helping them develop a website.
The answer to that is there'd be a bunch of fancy pools on the Upper East Side and nothing else in the rest of the city.
I'm not so sure. I think that some New Yorkers might want to say, I want to invest in this great project in the Bronx.
Tell me about Enhanced 311. I thought this was a very interesting project.
Yeah, well, New York was obviously one of the early pioneers of the 311 program, and it's great in so many ways, but it's time to take it to the smartphone era, and cities like Chicago and Boston and Washington, D.C. are really a lot more advanced than where New York is right now in having kind of apps for 311. Right now, we do have an app for 311, but I'll give you an example. In Boston, someone was able to take a photo of a possum in their garbage can in Boston. They reported it on their 311 Twitter feed there and said, what do I do? Someone in the neighborhood was able to see that query, that service response. They were able to see where it was. They went over and they solved the problem within a matter of hours. That can't happen in New York because we're not able to see the actual other service complaints that are put onto 311, and all these other cities are actually doing that right now, where you're able to actually get this running feed of the problems, when they're being solved, how they're being addressed, and it just makes the system much more accountable and more efficient.
Could New York flip a switch and make that happen, or is there a lot of enhancement that would be required?
There's a decent amount of enhancement that's required, but those other cities, I think because they started later, were able to put it together, and I think the next mayor could do it.
So in our last minute for all of you, I mean, as you hear the debates going on, we have candidates in all the time. We had on one last night. Do you have any access to their campaigns? Do you have any sense of, as you generate these ideas, that you're starting to hear it on the campaign trail? Anything like that?
You know, I think that there's a lot of talk about policy. I think getting the specific ideas with so many mayoral forums going on, I think that a lot of stuff just kind of disappears in the ether. And so we try to do the thinking for them. I think we try to come up with specific ideas. I mean, the beauty of our report is that these things have actually been implemented in other cities. You know, there's no kind of testing out anymore. These things have been done. And we actually interviewed a lot of New Yorkers and found that these things really could be implemented here.
You know, something you guys should take hope from is that, you know, as I recall, back in 2001, other than the 311 system, which he kind of borrowed from Mark Green, I don't remember Mike Bloomberg talking about any particular innovation compared to the slew that followed. And I think so it's more about having an administration rank that's open to, you know, reading a report.
I'll give you a great example. If you look at Chicago, Rahm Emanuel is seen as one of the most innovative mayors we've gotten in the last, 4 or 5 years across the country. He had a similar effort where there was a group called the Civic Consulting Alliance that road tested some ideas, presented it, but it wasn't until he got in office that he said, now let me take a look at it and begin to do the work. So that's what we're serving this up as.
And even in this existing administration, I mean, The fact that the mayor created the Center for Economic Opportunity, which became a source for trying to find different programs and city responses to helping people move out of poverty, kind of spawned a lot of experimentation in the different agencies. It's what created the Office of Financial Empowerment, which I used to run, and it enabled us to kind of have that opportunity to be working out of an agency, but also have the sort of ear and engagement of City Hall. And so I think some of the structural pieces that have been laid can really be utilized as well, in addition to sort of being able to corral these great ideas.
Okay, thank you all so much for spending some time with us. Folks, if you want to read the full report, go to nycfuture.org. We're going to take a short break now. I'll be back in a minute with the results of our SNAP poll and a preview of tomorrow night's program. Stay with us.